Hello, hello, hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I am Daragh, that is Shane.
Hello.
This is number 77. It has been a little while since 76. For those of you who are new, we talk all things rugby across the globe from the lens of Leinster and Ireland, which is where we come from. And if you're coming back, if you've already seen us, welcome back. We are going to be sort of back at it now. Heading into the international season, which is coming up towards the end of the year. Obviously, you're going to have New Zealand and Australia playing games. You're going to have the fit conclusion of this year's Six Nations after months and months off. And we're going to have the very exciting Autumn Nations Cup coming up in November, which should be a lot of fun with Georgia and Fiji involved with the Six Nations teams in Europe as well. So we're going to be here with you through all of that, covering all of that as the post-COVID rugby season takes some sort of shape. In all behind closed doors for the most part at the moment. But this week it's all about actually domestic rugby and Europeans' showpiece event. The challenge, the Champions Cup semi-finals are all taking place. The two games between Racing and Saracens, as well as Exeter and Toulouse. Indeed. So all English and French there for our shame. We're Leinster fans. We got our dose last week.
We did.
But we're going to be taking you through those games. If you aren't familiar with those teams, if you we're going to sort of give you an idea of what to expect and an idea of who might be favoured to come out on top in that one. And you know, there's a lot of high quality rugby once you get to this stage of European competition. So these are two games that we would definitely recommend, if you have the means, watching them, because it's going to be a treat this week.
For sure.
We're also going to touch on the Challenge Cup, the two semi-finals there briefly. The return of South African domestic rugby is also on the line. And at the end of the show, we'll take you through rugby's news of the week.
Absolutely. But first, I guess we're going to crack on with getting into the previews for this weekend's semi-finals. So the first one is, as we say there, it is Racing versus Saracens. A big marquee fixture, two bombastic teams. It's going to be on at 2 o'clock on Saturday, September 26th in La Défense Arena, even in Paris. And the referee is going to be Nigel Owens for that one. So home advantage is obviously in with Racing, courtesy of Saracens knocking Leinster out and taking the Aviva out of it. We won't say anything about that, but just a few stats on both sides. They're actually pretty even. When I was doing the prep, looking at the stats, a lot of them are evenly dispersed. Both have 93% for scrum success, 90% versus 80% goal kicking in favour of Racing actually. But the fact that it's indoors and the roof's closed probably means that the goal kickers will have an easier time of it, both sides. And the slightly more successful line out is with Racing, as well as the slightly more tackle success for Saracens. They're kind of nip and tuck there. The ones that I was really looking at as telling are Racing are averaging 4 tries per game so far to Saracens 2. That's over the look of the whole competition. So obviously Racing are moving the ball a bit more. They're averaging more passes, more carries, more offloads and more scores. But Saris, by contrast, are averaging more tackles made, winning more collisions, and winning more and conceding fewer penalties as well. So a slightly better disciplinary record for Saracens.
There's no question that lockdown in the early part of the season, Racing certainly would have looked the superior side. Saracens looked a bit broken. You would have said the same about Saracens' opponents last week, Leinster, who are our team, who were well and truly comprehensively beaten by the English Giants. And that's something that Racing will have to be wary of, because everything really has changed. French rugby has only resumed, English rugby has been going, and Saracens, obviously already relegated, have had the opportunity to stagger sort of their players, bring them back. Really time their players really well, but also they had a lot of fiercely competitive games because there's so much at stake for everybody else.
They've stacked that fixture list. The Premiership have been doing midweek games for the first time ever, kind of an unprecedented thing in rugby. The turnaround thought to be a bit too short, but it means that they've been kind of having 4 and 5 day turnarounds for a few weeks now. So the English teams, by and large, and there are 2 of them involved in these semis, they're a bit more match fit and a bit more ready than the French sides that have only just resumed.
The 2 that are playing have had the opportunity to sort of stagger their squads, Exeter and Saracens, for different reasons, Exeter being so far ahead and Saracens being so far out of it. But they've had competitive matches, and they came into that Leinster game really primed and really ready, and they put on an absolutely dominant physical display, winning that game 25-17. By contrast, Racing last week, they were thoroughly superior to Clermont out in Clermont, as I think we would have suspected. They have a very, very fine team, but now a lot of injuries picked up. They did have too much for Clermont. They do have some attacking flair. They did rack up 36 points, but a concern for them would be just how lacking they were in intensity, both teams. It was a very different game from the Leinster Saracens game, which was really played to a very, very high standard.
It was the highest standard match of the quarterfinal weekend. I think without a shadow of a doubt was the Saracens Leinster one. Certainly the All French affair it was on later that day, just seemed to have a slacker intensity and a lower pace. And it didn't help that it wasn't really that competitive, because Clermont, to be honest, haven't been at their usual strengths this year, and certainly were no match for Racing, who do look a serious team and good value for their semi-final place.
In terms of the teams, we're not expecting too much in the way of changes. What you can expect, Saracens have one of, if not the best packs ever assembled perhaps in English rugby, and while they've lost a lot of players since their whole drama with being relegated and everything else, and some guys have left, they actually have a brutally efficient pack. They've got Vunipola at loosehead, Jamie George at hooker, Vincent Koch, Maro Itoje, Tim Swinson, a very shrewd acquisition from Scotland. Michael Rhodes, who was man of the match last week at blindside flank, is going to play for England at some point. He's stated that as his objective, and I don't doubt that will happen. Jackson Ray as well at open side, and Billy Vunipola. It's that pack that really is the meat of their team. Racing, by contrast, have had a bit of an injury crisis, so their backline doesn't look as brilliant as it has done, with Curtly Beale obviously missing from suspension as well, and Teddy Thomas out injured. It's sort of a more makeshift back three, but their standouts would be Finn Russell, their playmaker. Juan Imhoff on the wing is a freakish finisher. Vakatawa is a brilliant player as well.
Great contributor.
As well as Camille Shah at hooker, who's absolute quality, and he's going to have to stand up big time to Saracens' pack. So we're going to take a quick look just through both teams in terms of what their intent is going to be and what they're going to be looking to do.
And what winning conditions are there for each, because absolutely both sides are capable of winning the game, but they'll be looking to do it through slightly different channels. They're very different teams that probably enjoy a different tempo of game. So I guess we'll start with Racing, the home side. From their point of view, what are they going to try and do with the ball? First off, so how are they going to try and attack this Saracens defence that is overwhelmingly physical, generally brings good line speed in the centres, tries to kind of bottle you in to force you back inside, where they know they can dominate the collisions with that pack you just listed out. So Racing then, when they really need to get it outside of that blitz, they need to move it quickly. They're like, Irabarin has been brilliant, has usurped Machino in the 9 jersey, because he does just bring that quick tempo, move the point of contact away from the ruck, and give Finn enough time and space to pick the kind of the sexy passes that we know and expect from him. They tend to stand a little deeper just to give him that much time, and they can attack you really from anywhere in the pitch. They are very, very game, especially in that U arena. They don't mind throwing the pass out. Vakatawa's offloading game will be crucial in terms of accessing that wide channels and getting outside those Saracens.
Well, one of the things from Racing's point of view, you know, when they're at their very best earlier in the year in the pool stages against Munster, you guys might have seen Finn Russell's nutmeg and Vakatawa running through and Teddy Thomas grabbing tries, and the all flair, all tempo approach of that attack. That is what they look like at their absolute best, for sure. But last week against Clermont, they really could rely a little more on their forward pack to give them go forward. They're only back in season a few weeks now, so they're sort of in pre-season mode a little bit. They look just a little lacking in sharpness. That's going to have to be much improved against Saracens, because if they do try and sort of set up plays with a few narrow carries, that's what Saracens be very wise to, and Saracens get out of the line probably like no other team in Europe, especially with the yards after the contact that they get both sides of the ball as well. They're brutal tacklers, and they'll get in your face, and if Racing want to do a couple of setup plays, they're likely going to be driven back, and Finn Russell's going to get the ball under pressure, and that's Saracens' winning picture. So what Racing really need to do is that it needs to be quick, yes, and wide. So you have Finn Russell standing deep. I really think in terms of weaknesses and where Saracens' defence is, when you've got a rushing blitz defence that's as aggressive as Saracens are, the isolated area is always that 13 channel. Now the incumbent there is Duncan Taylor, who is, you know, a fine player and had his good moments, but perhaps in defence could be attacked. And that's somewhere where I'd really like Saracens I'd really like Racing rather to overload that channel with a few bodies. I'd love to see them get class.
They have Vakatawa, who's capable of winning the contact and getting the offload. So if they can have runners either side off them,
exactly.
Just options,
I'd like to see one of the back row, be it Larray or Klassen, placed out in that channel, constantly being a threat, sitting down Duncan Taylor, maybe freeing up Vakatawa, or vice versa. I just think that that's an area they could really overload, especially when that's Finn Russell's go-to chip. So Duncan Taylor's going to be very wary about shooting up and giving Finn the space to chip in behind. So then if you can get runners over in that area, that's how you get go forward ball, and then once it's quick, it's got to stay quick.
For sure,
And the rest sort of sorts itself, because they've got such a beautiful distributor in Finn Russell, a deadly finisher in Imov on the left wing, and Vakatawa, likewise a sevens guy in his day, is just a super finisher himself. So I really do think if they can just access that channel, break through, once the line break happens in the U Arena, they turn them into tries. That's what it's about.
To turn them into tries. I do think that in order to set that up, there will be a burden of responsibility. Like, as much as you do need to get it wide and outside the Saris, the forwards will be required to step up and make some carries and make some yards, and they'll need to win them. But the way to win them is tempo is the key regardless. Even if you're going narrow, have it be a few variations. Have Iribarin have 3 different options, a few out from the ruck if you're going to play off 9 for a phase. Use footwork and deception to get around the Saris forwards, because you will not just win a bludgeoning collision with them. That much will.
No. And I do think it's dangerous, especially off first phase, to do those hit-ups. It's fine if you've gotten over the gain line, if you've probed out wide, broken through. Then you can have sort of a forward runner off 9 for a few phases, setting it up, keeping that tempo going, winning contacts, ball back, tempo going again. Those are fine hit-ups, but I really think off first phase, Racing have to emphasise getting it around Saracens' narrow blitz, outside them, because the other thing that does is it tires out the massive Saracens pack. They need to be moved around. They need to be moved from left to right to left to right. They need to not be able to get big hits in early and get their teeth into the match, because Saracens really do build their identity on those winning contacts,
for sure,
on both sides of the ball.
But also breakdowns, they'll need to be wary of resourcing their ball going forward, because if they get snagged, Saris do actually have poach men pretty much all over the field, so if they are isolated in a breakdown, that's going to be a risk for them. They need to mind the pill, but they need to turn their pressure into points very quickly. That's at their best, as you say. That's what they are. They're a 5 and 7 pointer team, especially in that U Arena. So they'll be looking for tries.
Exactly. Their best avenue for winning this game is to shock Saracens with tries, and lots of them, and whenever they're available. That is what they've built their benchmark on. They're a really exciting team to watch. Finn Russell is a joy when he gets his hands on the ball, when he gets freedom.
And to be fair, Iribarin over the last few seasons has been stellar as well. As Pity Generals go. Machino didn't do much wrong to lose his jersey. Iribarin's just been brilliant.
No question, Iribarin's fine. I think Finn Russell is the key though, and I think if he can be afforded any time, if he can sit a little deep against a blitz defence, there's vulnerabilities to that from a Racing point of view, in terms of Saracens are going to be trying to get up in your face, and if they can't do that, Finn Russell, there's no better man for unpicking a blitz defence than Finn Russell. He'll find where the space is. It will be somewhere, and then it's about converting that into tries. So from Racing's point of view, definitely avenues with the ball. The real concern for them is what happens from a defensive point of view when Saracens have the ball, because Saracens are like a well-oiled machine with the amount of threats they have.
They are indeed, and they're missing a few of those. They'll still be without their playmaker in Owen Farrell, but as we saw last week, that doesn't necessarily stop them from being effective. It's no harm given Faz's record against Finn Russell. That's true. That's definitely a factor, but it just means that they're kind of forced a bit narrower, but that's kind of where they'll want to play the game anyway. So it'll be a huge job for Racing without the ball to stymie that Saris go forward, because Saris will be comfortable holding the possession against them. It'll be up to players like Camille Shah even to get in and disrupt. Big turnovers at big moments will be key for both sides, and Racing definitely do have a few operators in the pack. Like Bird and LaRue have decent turnover plays in them, Benaroo as well, but Shah is really the one I'm looking at as the main source of turnover.
It's absolutely key, first of all, that they don't get blown away by the likes of Itoji and Vunipola, that they get low, that they chop, that they make sure that Saracens don't get any cheap yards. Saracens do have a very sophisticated attack. They do like to move the ball very sharply. I think it's probably the most underrated aspect of their game. You saw the Goods try last week. Alex Good against Leinster scored a beautiful
brilliant
try.
interplay with him and Taylor in the midfield.
Yeah, there was a lovely little screenplay. Billy Vanapola put in a sharp block, just running that narrow line, took Will Connors out. Duncan Taylor wins his contact, good picks a perfect line. It's those little plays they're so brilliant at, just making the perfect decisions. So in terms of disrupting that, you've got to look for vulnerabilities. And the vulnerability for me comes in discipline. Yeah. So if they can stop that pack, because Saracens will like to take it through the phases, they especially if they have the ball in your half, they're comfortable holding it, they'll probe everywhere. So if you can stop them at source and disrupt, that's what Camille Shah has to do. He has to tilt the Saracens pack by being in every ruck, as well as the back row, Claessens as well. Yeah. Getting in every ruck, Laurie too, looking at all of them. Yeah. Always have a man in there, keep probing on the ball, and just try and milk a loose Saracens clean out, or try and steal the ball, because one of the things that Saracens will do if you keep being in there is they'll go in the side, they'll give you a dig. Yeah. Rhodes last week was very lucky on a couple of occasions. He missed his, had played a brilliant game
and was man of the match,
but he was man of the match, but on a couple of occasions he did headbutts, one of which he was cited for that he got out of the way with. But Saracens do have those kind of tilty plays in them.
They do.
And if Camille can milk it,
if you can apply the pressure, that's where it comes from. Like when they feel no pressure, they are very disciplined and tend to control themselves and the game very well. But if they can apply some defensive pressure, like it's a big day actually for Sankoni, I think, young number 7 for them. If he can have an impact, that would be huge. They definitely need the back row to step up because they are outmatched and outgunned, I think, in terms of the pack. So they'll need a few performers to kind of shock Saris and kind of come in under the radar, and Sankoni is one who could. I also think Klemenchuk and Vakatawa on D in the centres have a huge job to do, because you don't really want Finn doing much tackling, and he tends to actually be in the backfield helping out with high balls, which will be a factor too. Sarri's attacking kicking game, probing kicking game, will try and pin them back a few times, especially when there's no wind.
The kicking game is going to be huge, especially when Saracens have the ball in their own half. They are going to box kick. They're going to fancy it against Zibo and Imov on the wings, who they're going to be have to play. They're gonna fancy putting those guys under pressure. It's something that worked really well for them against Leinster in terms of their exit play. They put a lot of pressure on. They have a lot of talent in their own regard in those high ball areas,
for sure. So Lewington on the wing for Sarries had an excellent game up against James Lowe, and he'll be looking for more of the same against disjointed Sarries back three that normally is their strength. It's not Sarries but Racing back three. It's unusual to see them as depleted as they are, and
it'll be a crucial area, because if they can defuse the Saracens bombs on Saracens exit, then they'll get clean ball, then they'll get an opportunity to run Saracens around. But if they don't, then they're going to start feeling the mounting pressure, possibly conceding penalties. So that is a massive area. But I do think, as you say, when Saracens have the ball in their half, the centres are going to be vital. Obviously, first port of call, Saracens are going to be narrow. They're going to look to get over the gain line. That's sort of the first area you have to stop. But with Saracens, there's always more and more threats. So then the second area is going to be that passing game. Now, without Farrell, I think there is license for Vakatawa to be a little braver. To shoot out of the line, to really shut down the outside, to force Good to throw, a 20-metre long pass. Like, maybe he pulls it off, but there's every chance that it lands in your lap or in Dimov's lap.
Well, you can want to have you don't want there to be the connection between Daly, Taylor, and Good, because if there is, that's obviously a recipe for disaster. It means Sarries are getting outside them, and it means that they're very dangerous. Then.
So that's the second. That's the second job of their defence, and then the third job is going to be in the backfield coverage, dealing with both the box kicking games on exit and then the probing offensive kicks that Saracens will put in.
Just grass finders and touch finders that they will be looking to try and pull them this way and that. They're very good at that, because they can hold the pill confidently no matter where they're on the field, and then they do have a good eye for attacking kicks. They've actually, even without Farrell, they've shown with a combination of Wigglesworth, Good and Daly all sharing the responsibility. It's a very varied kicking game they bring to any game, and it's tough for any team to try and defuse that. So that is a big job for Racing's T. And then I think we'll just move on and look overall at the set piece, because both sides will be angling for different things from the set piece. I was surprised to see that actually they both have the same success rate on scrums so far. They actually are sharing about.
You know what? Success rate on scrums is a false stat, and like a proper eye for it will see you better than stats ever will, because there's all sorts of anomalous. You recover the ball under a lot of pressure, or you just about recover your own ball versus absolutely marauding their pack.
True.
Can be the same, as well as refereeing.
Well, yeah, I have little doubt that the more dominant scrums have come from Sarries. Certainly they had like 5 in the first half last week against Leinster, which are no mugs.
Saracens' performance last week in the scrum was exceptional.
Yeah.
Not least because while they do have brilliant props,
and like aggressive
Vincent Koch getting an edge over Cian Healy, the veteran, and Maka Vunipola doing a real job on Andrew Porter. They were definitely on top. But what you saw in a lot of cases was just the sheer power that came through from the back 5 as soon as the ball came in. Once the props had a decent angle on it, the power, and they really did scrum as an 8, they scrummaged for penalties.
And they are just a big side. There's a lot of mass between Vunipola and Rhodes. And Ray is probably the smallest guy in that pack, and he's not small.
And what you have by contrast in the engine room for Racing here is Dominic Bird, who's sort of a light, rangy lock, and Bernard Leroux, who's a converted back row.
Yes, so it's a little softer.
It's undoubtedly a little softer. So there's no question for me that Saracens are going to target the scrum as they did last week.
Despite the fact that Benarou and even young Henry Colombe have had really good scrummaging performances, they were well on top of Clermont last week. But we're just going to emphasise again that there's going to be a step up. That Racing might feel like in the first 20 minutes they might be shocked, as Leinster were in the first half. They may feel a huge increase in the intensity versus what they were facing, and that'll come through in scrum
Saracens
time.
are going to attack, and they're going to look to scrum with penalties, so Racing need to scrum to lock it down,
scrum
and get
for parity,
ball.
scrum for
the
ball.
benefit in Racing's favour here is that Nigel Owens is the referee, and Nigel Owens does not like giving scrum penalties, so unless you get a sort of a comical level of dominance where that's what's happening in the scrum, Nige isn't going to give you the penalty.
And he'll occasionally blow for an erroneous spinning penalty that might go against Saracens.
In fact, if you're losing in the scrum as the Racing tight head, just turn inwards and walk towards your hooker, and then throw your hands up at Nige, and he might well give a driving in penalty because it's his favourite call. But Saracens will look for an aggressive dominant scrum, and Racing will look for parity. At line out time, I think both sides are evenly matched. I don't expect either to really go at each other. I expect Racing's game to be stop Saracens' maul at source if they can.
Well, I do expect Saracens to go to the catch and drive more often and in more areas of the pitch. Like they'll do it for some exit plays, but they'll definitely start in a few times off 22 attacking opportunities. Sarries will launch with a catch and drive just to test the metal of those Racing forwards. They'll definitely feel that they have the edge in those areas, and will try and go to it. Whereas Racing will set up a few. Certainly, if they're 5 meters out with a penalty, they'll try and set a catch and drive. But generally, I'd expect them to more, if they can get the line out right through Shat and Bird and Leroux, get it off the top and get it out wide. It'll same principles as the breakdown. Just try and move the point of contact and move the Sarries forwards around. Whereas Sarries will try and I expect both of them to dominate their own ball in terms of the line out. To use it slightly.
I expect large parity at set piece.
If there's an edge at scrum time,
there might be an edge for Saracens at scrum time, depending.
Kickoffs will kind of be interesting too, as well. If Sarries, certainly Farrell, they're used to pinning teams back off restart, and there's no wind in the arena, so kicking is kind of a game plan. It'll be interesting to see how both sides restart. It's a kind of a lesser set piece, but a little bit of intrigue there.
The standard these days is to kick deep and try and get a line out set up, and I would expect both to try and execute that as well as they can. In terms of Saracens now, we've looked at Racing and what they need to do to win the game, and we've given them an edge. From Saracens' point of view, when they have the ball, what are they looking for in the Racing defence? How do they foresee getting an advantage in this game? We'll just speak on that at the moment for a moment. One of their, as I was saying earlier, I think their attack is one of the most underrated. The way that they probe, the way that they probe for weakness, the way that they move the ball around, and the way that they isolate defenders is a thing of beauty.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do think fundamentally they're going to look to get an edge in the power game before moving to Good, especially with Good at 10 and no Farrell.
Yes.
Just to give him a bit of an armchair ride. They're not going to be putting him under too much pressure.
They're playing a lot off 9. Wigglesworth has been excellent for them, an absolute stalwart. I think they will play.
I think it starts off front.
Collision. It starts on the gain line for Saracens with the ball. That's where particularly in the early going, as they did with Leinster, they won't necessarily be seeking the tries. They'll be seeking to impose themselves on either side of the ball. So it may mean kicking it to them and smashing them without it. But when they have the ball, I think they will err on a narrower side and try and run over them, probe around the fringes a little bit, make them feel their presence.
I don't expect Saracens to try and attack from deep where Racing might.
Yeah.
I would expect from pretty much everywhere inside their own 10.
Barring kick return.
They're going to be kicking, and they're probably going to start the game. Unless this fails comprehensively, I think they're going to be trying to put Imov and Zebo under lots of pressure.
Under whoever else is in the winger jersey. We don't have the teams as we're shooting this, but there's kind of a vacant winger slot in Racing that maybe it was filled by Tranduc last time, and that obviously they probably won't go with that this time. They surely have another option. But untested as that back three is, so they'll try and test the cohesion and just the chops under the hands under the high ball.
The Saracens like to start games by putting their opposition under an enormous amount of pressure. They're going to put high balls up, try and retain possession, and then try and dominate physically. They do get a nice little offload game going in their forwards, but they just like to physicalize their opponents, as Ryan Baird would say.
Indeed.
Get on top of them, run over the Racing pack, establish dominance, and then look to move it wide. Yeah. And that's where I think they're going to be looking at the Klemenchuk Vakatawa axis, and especially outside Vakatawa. If he, like I was saying, from a Racing point of view, you can give him license to be brave and attack good, but the way Saracens' shape works, the screen plays that they like to set up, it should be a not too difficult task for them to isolate Vakatawa away from Klemenchuk and maybe look to exploit space, whether it be in behind him if he's coming flashing out, or just, you know, the way Racing set up their screenplay, they have an out. It's like they're pioneers of it. Everybody does it these days, but they have an out half and a short runner and a guy out back, and they can set that shape up 3 or 4 times in the one backline move.
Yes.
But very straightforwardly, they just keep. If Jamie George is running that short line, they can give the ball to Jamie George, back him to get an edge with a bit of footwork on his tackler who's in front of him, and then there's a hole in behind Vakatawa who's shooting for the behind man where support runners come. And that was the beauty of their try against Leinster last week. Just giving the ball to the right guy, having him edge his contact, and then having support runner come instantly behind him to fill the space. That's the beauty of the Saracens attack, and I expect they'll try and puncture holes through the middle of Racing. If that doesn't work, they'll try little attacking kicks. They'll probe all day long.
They will probe. That probing is definitely one of the, it's a very versatile attack that they have. Like, they have loads of these set pieces and sequences and just kind of sets for different pictures. They isolated, as you said, Will Connors for that try. The subtle block took him out of the game. They knew he was their main tackler. That'll be a different picture with Racing. But they do learn as the game goes on. Like, even if it's a 9-point game at the beginning that they've racked up a few 3-pointers, they will figure out what picture's being presented, and they will have a few options to try and isolate. If they see that the space is in the 13 channel, they'll have a few options to try and isolate that offset piece, or just in the open play. They are quite a good learning team. Like, Mark McCall has such a good mind for the game, and they also just have a playbook of very effective set pieces that they all know inside out how to run. So I expect them to try and, like, their perfect picture of what to do with the ball is kind of apply the pressure, keep the scoreboard ticking, particularly in the first half, kind of get themselves into the 22, take 3s or 5s from those visits, make sure that you do, and then shut out Racing on the other side. As you say, physicalise, impose themselves on it. It's a very unpleasant thing playing Saris, and part of it is their scoreboard awareness and their savvy and their nous, but also the fact that they're trying to get a read on you throughout the whole game, and they are looking for space even when they're not necessarily looking to penetrate. They may only be going a couple of phases before they set up a box kick, but they always have a mind for what the defence is presenting them with and how best to unlock that. So that's going to be tough for Racing, because I think they're a very sophisticated offence, as you say, and they just present a whole load of threats.
And likewise on defence, which is where they've made their name more so justifiably or unjustifiably, as the case may be. Their defence is brutal, and it's just about it is about dominant collisions in that narrow area. Like, one of the things Racing have been looking to do is getting Camille Shah on the ball in that channel inside 10, trying to get on top of his defender and move forward. And one of the things that Saracens might be looking to do is deploy one of their many excellent physical tacklers, Rhodes or Itoji or Billy Vunipola.
Even Swinson has a big hit in them,
exactly. Into those channels, and a great early picture for Saracens would be to smash Camille Shah and knock him back.
Spills the ball or something, a turnover, or as I actually put it down here on defence, like they will be shooting up into the passing lanes of Finn, but it'll come from, they'll only be doing that if they physicalise them on the inside, so Finn's kind of panicking with kind of looser ball, they will get into his space, and if they can pick off an intercept try or something, obviously you don't want to root for intercepts, but that's definitely a symptom of the Sarries' defensive shape and tactics working. The suspension, I should say, of Kirtley Beale really does leave Racing, while they are a brilliant attacking team, there is one creative general now in that back line. Iribarren notwithstanding, I think they know they're going to have to play wider than that. Yes.
So it's really all about Finn Russell, and while he is a brilliantly creative joy to watch with ball in hand and the way he unlocks defences, there is scope for putting him under pressure, and there's also scope for fooling him. One of the things I'd like to see Saracens deploy is painting these false pictures to Finn Russell, because they're going to be putting him under a lot of pressure. They're going to have someone up in his face the whole time, and I just like the idea of maybe just as a probing, because he's so instinctual, he likes to operate just off the cuff. If you put him under pressure, and say for example Duncan Taylor in the 13 shirt comes flying up out of line and is outside, that's the kind of thing that might convince Finn Russell instantly, I see you, space is in behind you, I'm going to flick it on my right toe like I so like to do. Vakatawa is going to come in and take this ball, and we're going to get the same try we scored against Montpellier.
He's wise to it.
Exactly. But instead of, that's exactly what Saracens want him to do. You chip into that space, he finds Elliot Daly, he finds Wigglesworth, he finds somebody in that space, and Saracens steal the ball. I think there's all sorts of subtle things you can do with Finn Russell. It's hilarious to me that no English team has yet figured him out. He's a brilliant player, and he tends to unlock English defences. So there is that concern there for Saracens. But they do need to get up in his face, they do need to rough him up, and they probably do need to employ those little subtle things like painting him false pictures, creating confusion and doubt into his mind,
getting in his passing lanes, force him at the bottom of rucks. If he finds himself at the bottom of too many rucks because there's no offensive pictures for him, it's a great day out for Sarries' team.
The picture is clear. You stop Finn Russell, you stop Racing.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly right. That is the equation for Sarries without the ball. Definitely think that it's mainly collision based. Just one thing, the back three, Lewington, Daly and Maitland, as well as painting false pictures, they will need to keep their cohesion as well. They definitely, because Finn Russell, as you say, will have an eye for the space. He's good at dropping it on the toe, put for attacking kicks.
He has as many passes and kicks into him from an offensive point of view as any 10 in the world.
He does,
He can put the ball, he can crossfield kick, little chips, grubbers, tight grubbers to himself. And any pass in the locker as well. He has every play in his locker.
So big job for Elliot Daly, to be honest, at fullback, because they've obviously missing Farrell, as we've alluded to, so it means Good has to step in and do the 10 job. The backfield is definitely his purview, especially with Maitland on one wing and the young Lewington. They need chaperoning for sure, so kind of he becomes a fulcrum of a jersey on the defence, because if he can shut down all of those options for Finn, then by the end of the game, if the picture is that there's just too much pressure for Racing to get anything off, and they're kicking a bit loosely to Elliot Daly or whoever is under it, having a lot of time to regather and go at them, that is just that's exactly what Mark McCall will want from his defence, is that by the end that they're just gobbling up some loose turnovers and going again, because it'll just mean that their pressure game has told and they've managed to smother Racing.
So now that we've looked at sort of the winning conditions for both sides, either side of the ball, what each side needs to do, what the weapons of each side are, how we think it's going to go, who do you think edges it?
I am tending to lean towards Sarries with this one, for a few reasons. Certainly, I think the intensity that we were alluding to earlier, I think the English teams are both going to have an advantage as far as just being primed for match readiness. I think the Premiership has been played at a decent standard for a few weeks, whereas we're only seeing a bit of a pre-season look to the French teams. That'll definitely disadvantage for Racing. As much as it's a home game under the U Arena, that's good for Racing. It's also good for Sarries, like they're comfortable playing that game. And just I often go back to as well the 3 stars on the jersey versus the no stars. There's European pedigree is on Sarri's side. Yeah. They just managed to beat away from home their first ever win in Dublin against the Pro 14 champions, the unbeaten
first ever win in Dublin. A lot of those English boys have no fear of Dublin.
Well, yeah, but Saracens' first win in Dublin, they managed to get that. They are buoyed with confidence. They will be more than ready to go over to Racing,
and they've got a narrative thing going. The world is against them, and from a Saracens fans' point of view, if they were to be enforced relegation down to the Championship with a European Cup, it would be a big statement and also a big middle finger to the rest of Europe, like, we are still here, we are still the best, and you can't stop us in that regard. They have a brilliant pack. Racing have to get off to a fast start. They tend to slow down anyway. They have to build up a lead, and I think we'll know pretty quickly.
No, by the end of the first quarter, probably. I kind of think even if it's tight, even if Racing are 3 or 4 points ahead at that point.
No, they've got to really put Saracens under scoreboard pressure from an early point of view. They do have the tools to unlock them. They're never going to be quite out of the game because of the offensive weapons that they have. But if Saracens, what I suspect will happen is that Saracens are going to put them under a lot of pressure. It's going to be just rugby played to a level that they haven't experienced since pre-lockdown, and it's going to shock them as it shocked Leinster. And I would suspect Saracens to get an edge, but there is a caveat to that, which is that Racing are lightning, and if Saracens are happy enough to build their 3-6-9s and don't get that try to kill off the game that they did get against Leinster, Racing will always be in it. But my suspicion is just on match fitness and just on the sheer brilliance of the pack that Saracens have, that they will edge the game and go on to another European final.
Tempo is key. You'll be able to see the telltale signs in the first half, who's actually creating the tempo of the game. If it's a bit more slow, a bit of kicking, tennis back and forth, that just is exactly what Saracens want. Racing want the fast-tempered, kind of furious, pull them this way, then that. So you'll be able to see very early on who's actually managing to get the better of that. I am erring on the side of Sarries probably by about between 5 and 7 in the end.
I would go with something similar. I certainly wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay, well then we will move on to our second semi-final of the weekend, which also happens on Saturday at 3:30 in Sandy Park. And the referee
wild kickoff times, by the way.
Yeah, I know, they overlap. They're like
first game is 2:00, next game is 3:30. Decent for TV audiences, they'll be back to back. But in terms of UK time, pretty early, not exactly prime time.
No, indeed.
But sure, look.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have Exeter v Toulouse in Sandy Park, as I say. Two serious teams. Exeter sitting top of the Premiership at the moment, and
their first ever European semi-final.
It is Cup semi-final. It is Exeter's first ever Champions Cup semi-final. It ain't Toulouse's first rodeo with the 4 stars they have on their jersey, but its home advantage is very much with the English on that one. Just looking at the quarterfinals, Toulouse absolutely trounced a rather haphazard Ulster side in France. It was 36-8 in the end to Toulouse. And Exeter also trounced another kind of not great looking side, Northampton, who kind of threatened to make a game of it in the first 10 minutes but didn't actually score anything, and therefore didn't, and it ended up being a 38-15 win for Exeter. Pretty routine against most Premiership sides, Sarries notwithstanding, but that's normally what Exeter do. So yeah, 2 one-sided quarterfinals. Definitely kind of not the most intense games either, I think.
No, by no means.
Neither
side really had to leave second gear.
Yeah, second or maybe third. If you want to give Northampton some credit, and maybe Exeter got out of third gear to see them off, but like not top quality stuff. It will be a lift in intensity this weekend, regardless of what happens, because they're 2 quality sides matching up against each other. And just a few little stats by Toulouse are the last unbeaten side remaining in this year's competition. They went 6 from 6 in the group stages and then won their quarterfinals, so 7 from 7. Statistically, then we have 87-94 percent scrum success in favour of Toulouse, which is kind of surprising. Toulouse have the more scrum success than Exeter this year.
Yeah, well, there you go. What did we say about scrum?
We did say
Toulouse may have more scrum success. They do not have better scrum. A better scrum than Exeter. So
that's an interesting one. Pretty even on goal kicking, line out success in around the 90th percentile for line out. Actually, goal kicking is edged rather dramatically by Exeter, 97% versus 89%. So 97% is a freakishly high stat.
They get every kick.
One. They just get every kick. Both 97% on ruck success, 85-84 tackle success in favour of Exeter.
Do you know what contributes to the kicking success as well, though, is the fact that Exeter never take penalties from corners because they're always going to the corner.
For sure. It's only a percentage, so that's definitely true. Surprisingly, to me anyway, Exeter are edging it on points and tries scored for the tournament so far.
But they own the game. It's not that they don't attack. It's that the sides are very, very different.
Yes.
This for me is the ultimate sort of styles make fights.
Yes,
game of rugby that we're looking at here. We have the sort of this smothering. If you want to look at MMA, sort of wrestler type against this sort of flashy striker type in Toulouse.
Well, I think the one stats are, I was just going to rattle these off, but the one stat that illustrates that point is offloads. Like Toulouse have been averaging more carries, passes and offloads per game than them, but the offloads especially, Exeter average about 4.8 offloads per game, Toulouse are up at 12.5, which is and serious amount of offloading.
Exeter will offload less than that in a game that's tight as well.
Yes, indeed.
They sometimes get flashy when they're dominating a game, but for the most part their identity is to be tight and physical.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting in that regard when you have this team that's going to just attack from everywhere versus this team that likes to slow the pace right down, do these long caterpillar rucks in their own half, put up a bomb of a box kick, chase it up, put pressure on you, own the contact area, defend sharply, and then when they get the ball, suck the life and tempo out of the game until you're just so tired and concussed from making so many tackles that they fall over the line, and the next time you get the ball, you're shattered and you don't know what to do with it.
It's true.
So there's that dynamic is fascinating, and it'll be curious to see who gets on top of it. We're going to take a look at this game through the same framework we did the last. We're going to start with Exeter. What are they looking to do with and without the ball? But first, just what are they looking to do with attack when they have the ball?
As far as Exeter are concerned, you kind of outlined it very well. They're looking to have the slower tempo game, but they're going to look to utilise their huge pack. They have a very, very big pack. Well-drilled forwards are just going to try and win collisions and gain momentum first, regardless of where they are in the pitch. Even if they're setting up a box kick, that's normally their MO to do it. They have been a bit more varied this season. I'll give credit where it's due. In the middle of the field, in the middle third of the field, they have mixed it up. Slade is a really good conduit for some attacking play in the 13 channel. He takes some of the kicking responsibilities off their halfbacks because they'll kick from 13 for exits, and they have Stewie Hogg even further out, so they have a lot of
Hogg and Noel
options.
in the back three is very offensive as well.
Yes, and they have been utilising them. They have a few good strike plays off set piece in the middle third of the pitch that they'll definitely try and do. But for me, really, it's when they actually get into the 22, like Georgia. Actually, that's when the real Exeter rugby starts. That's what Chiefs rugby is just hold the pill in the 22. Just demand tackles of your opposition by just picking and going. Doesn't matter if it's 30 phases. And they have been slightly better at recognising the space when they've sucked the men in this season than they had been in seasons gone by. It's not always just the pick and jam try, but that is their first port of call. They can spread it to the wide and finish it with wingers like Tom O'Flaherty and Noel do pick off their fair share of tries for them.
Last season, Leinster actually put together the painting of how to beat this Toulouse team. I don't think they've recruited well enough up front. In fact, they're one man weaker. They're down in Elstad since Leinster played them, and they have more recruitments except for Kino, who's now a year older. So their pack is largely the same as the pack that fell to Leinster twice last season. They fell once, and then they had a long time to think about dealing with it, and they came and lost to the exact same game plan in Dublin last year. And that was a very Exeter model performance from Leinster. It was slow, it was physical,
30 plus phases a lot of the time.
But it was possession. We owned the ball. We had little varied moves, but we owned the ball and we owned the collisions. And Toulouse, while they have a very flashy, brilliant backline, their pack can get leggy, and they can get very lost when they get starved of the ball.
Like many attacking teams, they don't like defending for long
periods. And they don't have too many poachers in their pack in terms of getting ball at the breakdown. So it can be an easy enough task to sort of hold the ball, bludgeon them, work them up front, and then kill them by a million carries. And then the next time they get the ball, they're so shattered, they're sort of a little leggy, and they're not themselves. That very much is the Exeter model, obviously, when they get into the Toulouse 22. But one of the things that I think they should consider, especially with their attacking weapons, is not necessarily kicking it to Toulouse off the box kick exits. I certainly wouldn't try and kick the ball to Cheslin Colby. First of all, if you get the kick wrong, he's one of the best wingers in the world. One of the best wingers in the world. He could punish you and score a try in an instant.
Yeah.
Second of all, he's actually lethal in the air.
Yes, he does have a serious leap on him. He may be vertically challenged, but he actually compensates by getting so high in the air.
He's lethal in the air, and you're just giving Toulouse the ball back, which is exactly the picture you don't want. So what I would really love to see from Exeter, obviously we know their game plan. If they get any kind of possession in the Toulouse half, they're going to hold it, they're going to bludgeon, they're not going to take too many risks because they're going to back themselves to edge the contacts against Toulouse and bludgeon them to a slow death.
Yes.
That's going to be the Exeter plan. Maybe milk a penalty, kick it in the corner, restart until you get a try.
Yeah.
But in terms of their exit, in terms of when they have the ball in their own half, I'd love to see them get the ball in Slade's hand. I'd love to see them test the defensive nous of Gatun at 13. Aki is obviously a really tough bugger at 12 for Toulouse, but Gatun is very much more offensive minded than defensive minded, as well as this whole team are.
For sure.
But getting him going backwards, making him feel physicality early on.
Yes.
That could be a very nice picture for Exeter, and making their backs make tackles as well as their forwards.
Yeah.
I would love to see them move the ball a bit more out of their own half, and I think they should, because I think the way to beat this Toulouse team is to starve them off the ball, and I don't think they actually have the tools in their locker to prevent you from doing it.
Yeah, well, and I actually think as far as their strengths, like Maunder and Simmons, the halfbacks for Exeter, are quite decent players without being spectacular. But they do have littered throughout the back line in Noel and Slade and Hogg at fullback, and even O'Flaherty is just proper danger and proper exiting options. Like, you can go pass Slade kick, you can go pass Hogg kick for an exit. You don't have to box kick it every time. Variation from their own half as far as that's concerned will be key. They do tend to throw the ball around a little bit, as we said, in that middle third. They're confident enough doing it. It's only really when it gets to the 22 that they kind of revert more into that pick and jam shape. But it might be nice to see them just hold the ball even a little bit in their own 10 metre. You don't want to try and kill it necessarily. There is a risk of going off your feet and getting pinged for a penalty. But you're right in saying the blueprint has been laid for how to beat this Toulouse side, and it's one that Exeter will relish, because it's just hold the ball, demand they make tackles, force them to go through phases. It's their best form of defence, and we'll go through their defence when they don't have the ball, but the best way to defend Toulouse is to not give them the ball.
And kick on your own terms. Setting up the caterpillar rucks and box kicking, maybe it'll work. Maybe they'll put, Jack Noel will put Huge, for example, under enough pressure that he stuffs the ball, or Ramo, who's the fullback. But I just think in general it's a high tariff game, and I think if they move the Toulouse team defence around, force them to make a few tackles, resource their rucks well, they might be able to kick a little more on their own terms, get the ball in behind Toulouse, force them to kick and exit, and then set up an offence. I just think that's a better approach, with less risk involved than the box kicking approach, where you're running the risk of Cheslin Colby making a serious play, taking the ball with the hands over the heads, going forward, and then all of a sudden speed, Toulouse have the ball. And that sort of brings us to what Exeter need to be looking at in those instances when Toulouse have the ball. Their first port of call is going to be limiting them, trying to limit the areas where they do get the ball, but they do need to be hyper conscious that when Toulouse have the pill, this is the most dangerous time of the game.
They're a razzle-dazzle team. They are more threat than more pace than Exeter face at all in the Premiership. Like, we've seen this Exeter team struggle with Gloucester when they move the pill. Toulouse is a different animal as far as moving the pill from Gloucester. They really, really do appreciate space, and they know how to attack. To a man, they know how to draw and give. And they know how to flood channels with players and overload short sides with runners, which is something that this Exeter side have definitely been susceptible to short side forays in over the season as well. They've been caught napping on the blind side. Toulouse love flooding small channels, like all French teams, small little congested channels with lots of players.
No, Dupont will make a break, and Kano will be on his shoulder, and Cheslin Colby will be on his shoulder, and if you don't shut that down instantly, it's a try.
Exactly.
And that is the danger with Toulouse. They have danger all over. Their two centres, Aki and Gatun, are so underrated in how they link Dupont and that back three. They're actually really, really clever attacking players. So from an Exeter point of view, the first port of call obviously is always in that tight area. They are nice and physical. They do have the bigger, stronger, much more organised pack. They need to be making
probably the fitter pack on balance as well. I'd expect big Charlie Famuina to have maybe 50 minutes in him before he's completely gassed.
Well, and we'll get on the set piece, and that's an area of real concern for Toulouse as well. But in terms of Exeter on D, obviously dominating those tight collisions, but spreading themselves a little wider, I think, is key. covering
keep your feet. Don't compete unless there's a turnover there, and get bodies on their feet in the defensive
But also
line.
just like you can go man on man in the tight areas pretty comfortably. It's just not how Toulouse want to play.
Yeah.
And Francois Quad, these guys, they're decent players, but Exeter will back themselves one-on-one to win those contacts. So maybe there's license to move someone like a Simmons or someone, a back rower, into the wider channels to cover that sort of threat that Toulouse are going to constantly have. Yeah. And then I think the performance of Devoto, whether it's Devoto or Witten at 12 along with Slade, is going to be key, and that's going to involve essentially putting Ntamak under so much pressure that he can't get his centres involved, that he can't access that back three that's so dangerous. Toulouse will like to stand deep and move it wide, and it's important that when Toulouse are super deep that they don't fly up, because you're not going to be able to cover that space in time. So in those instances, you're coming up as a line, you're drifting across, you're not giving them any space in the wide channels. Leave more space on the inside channels. Be sure to tackle man on ball, smother Ntamak every chance you get, because he is their weak point. He gets raved about in media and everything else, but Ntamak is not. He's not as good as the players around him. Dupont
is key. As much as you say, leave space on the inside. Pillars don't go wandering, or guards.
That's not what I mean.
I know. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. But I'm saying as well, you have the temptation to kind of fan out and cover that space. Don't let the pillar go wandering either, because English teams are guilty of it, and I'm convinced it's because they call them guards, not pillars. Guards go walkabout, pillars stay put.
Yes,
pillars on
either side of the ruck have to stay put,
and because Dupont will spy that instantly and catch them out. If Toulouse are going wide and fanning them out, they just need to be aware. They need to keep their shape, keep men on their feet, don't compete unless there's a genuine chance at stealing the ball or slowing the ball, and only have a few selective people that they will have go in. They do have some good turnout, chop and poach kind of players, Cowan-Dickey and Simmons and Vermeulen and Ewers, and even actually Harry Williams has a steal or two in him as well. They're kind of very difficult to move. It's going to be a simple chop and poach kind of game. If you're all on your feet and your defensive line has its integrity, then just one-on-one chop and poach. They will try and stymie Toulouse that way and force a kick or force some loose play.
Well, if they're forcing kicks, they're in great shape.
That's the business for them.
Obviously, they have the likes of Stuart Hogg as well, and Jack Noel, who they deploy sparingly, but can be lethal playing heads-up rugby. That back three can be as lethal as anybody with Flaherty in there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So if they're forcing loose kicks out of Toulouse, that is definitely a good picture for Exeter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of good pictures for Exeter, we're going to take a look now at the set piece in this game.
Yes, indeed.
Starting with the scrum, and this is an area that could be make or break for Toulouse. I mean, at the start of last week, in the Toulouse match against Ulster, they were actually struggling a little with Ulster scrum, and Ulster scrum is one of the weakest in the Pro 14, which is the weakest league in Europe by far. So that the amount of level that they're going to be stepping up to go into this Exeter scrum,
the Exeter scrum
that makes good scrums look atrocious. They have six world-class scrummaging front row players that they're going to be deploying in the 23. Last week they went with Hepburn and Harry Williams starting in prop, and then they had Ben Moon and Thomas Francis to come on.
They could rotate that. They could Cowan-Dickey as well is just such a classy operator and a really aggressive scrummager. They do scrum as an 8, and they're very effective at it. They're a set piece kind of team. They're a bits and pieces team, but Rob Baxter really does have them well drilled, and they can launch off of either scrum or line out maul. They will be looking to try and tie up Toulouse forwards in both of those areas and try and get a nudge on. Toulouse will be looking for parity.
Meanwhile, Toulouse has Cyril Byatt, Loosehead, and Big Charlie Femuina still trying to lock the scrum down from Tighthead. And he doesn't have many minutes in him these days. They got a couple of young sort of rookie-ish guys covering the props. This is going to be an area where if I'm Rob Baxter, I'm thinking this is where we should really attack.
It's a big responsibility for the engine room as well, because Takori and Arnold are a big physical engine room that they have there. They need to be playing their part in locking the scrum down. They need to scrum cohesively. They are sometimes guilty of switching off, and Exeter are very good at spotting those kinds of times. If it's at 50 minutes in the match or something, and the props are kind of wayward and aghast, and someone's getting treatment, and then we're of time off, and that the resumption of play is a scrum, I'd back Exeter to be the ones to pounce on that scrum and grab a penalty, no matter whose feet it is, more so than I'd back Toulouse. Toulouse have to try and get parity in that area, in that set piece, and then make it about a different thing. They don't want it about scrums. If the game becomes about scrum penalties, that's a game that Exeter are winning, particularly in Sandy Park.
Yeah, at line out I don't expect too much. I don't expect Toulouse to go to the maul at all.
No,
I expect,
probably
but
not.
I think
they
Toulouse
might
have
shape to do a maul before they peel it.
I think Toulouse have a sharp enough line out that they won't be too disrupted by Exeter.
Yeah,
I do think that Exeter will go to the line out maul when they're in the red zone, and that's just about it.
Yeah.
But Exeter aren't even too concerned with their line out maul. If it doesn't work, they'll just set up their possession attack and go again and again.
Yeah, sure. Very often when they're in the 22, they won't kick to the corner. They will tap and go. They're one of those teams that will tap and go and set up a ruck.
Yeah. So the scrum is huge, and the scrum could be the loss of the game for Toulouse. It could be that way.
Like that's what I'm saying. If there are penalties at scrum time, if there are to be many of them, because who's reffing it? Did we say Andrew Brace? Yeah, he will ping if they're getting on top.
Yeah,
I think he will. Like certainly if the picture is just buckling by the end, that like
he's not as bad as Nige at not giving penalties, but he can be. So a lot of these refs don't look at scrums. Just don't look at literally don't look at scrums. They stand and look the other way and hope.
Look at the ball, point to the ball.
There it is.
What about the mush that's happening in the front row? It doesn't matter.
But sure, look, onward.
We digress.
And we're going to just take a look at Toulouse now.
Toulouse, the away side. Obviously, it's tough enough in Sandy Park that will play, even without the fans. That will be a factor. Like it's a slightly muddier pitch than what they were playing on last week against
Ulster.
Decent
Nick. Hope it's not a mud ball they're walking into.
No, it's not a mud ball, but it's a slower. Like the climate's different. It's a slightly damper, slightly slower pitch. The pace of play will be slightly lower, which doesn't suit Toulouse. That being said, tempo. That's got to be the Toulouse game. Yeah. Same as what we were saying for Racing against Saracens. It's a similar dynamic. Big English pack. You want to move them around the park. You don't want to be. You don't want the focus to be on collision points in the tight.
You don't want rooks.
You don't really want rooks.
One of the things
they keep the ball alive better than most.
One of the things that was, I'm sure anybody who follows European rugby would have seen the other week. They scored a try against Clermont with 13 men that started with Ramos instead of taking his medicine and taking a line out 5, doing a between the heels pass on his own line that went about 15 metres and cleared the space, and they went from there and scored a try.
Yeah.
They have danger all over the park. The offensive instincts of Dupont, of Aki, of Gitoun, of Colby, of Houget,
of Kaino,
of Kaino,
who's been hanging out in the wide channels, making passes,
and Ramo as well. That the offensive instincts of those guys are so sharp that it's just they have such a wonderful read off each other that they're going to challenge Exeter and show that Exeter defence just a level of jouet that they just wouldn't experience in the Premiership. The closest they get is Gloucester, who are the team who've shocked Exeter in times gone by recently. But Toulouse are just going to take it to another level, constantly moving it wide, constantly flooding channels with loads and loads of players, keeping the ball alive. If you're stuck, throw it backwards to Dupont, who's just going to whip it the other way. Keep probing for weak contacts. Take a ruck when you have to, but clear it super quickly. As you say, tempo, but also just reading each other, running support lines.
Support lines is really where they are the best in Europe, I think. I think Toulouse's support running is on another level compared to it because it's that jouet, and it affords them the opportunity to normally you want a 10 taking it to the line. Actually, Ntomac tends to sit a little deeper just so that the blitz defence isn't effective. They can go backwards wide, as long as they're going wide and probing. They can get outside defences that way. They're very, very good at it. They genuinely, keeping the ball alive, avoiding breakdowns and contacts in general will be the way to just fracture what is a very structured, organised defence in Exeter. Try and force them to kind of shut down a play one side, and before there's even a breakdown or an offside line, it's over somewhere else. One of the things
they did so well against Ulster as well is having both Gitoun and Aki run after they break the line, having the next phase being a sharp line picked off 9 by Aki or Gitoun, and they mixed that up, and they got so much purchase out of Ulster. Once they won a contact, Dupont cleared it, and all of a sudden it looks like they're going wide, and back against the grain comes one of those sharp centres. They mix that up so well, and then once the line break happens, tries there, because everybody's dialed in to finding the try once the line break happens.
Exactly.
And that's the key. That is the key. Shocking Exeter with a level of offence that they haven't seen yet. It's all offence for Toulouse.
Exactly. All out attack is how it has to be, because it is their best recipe for success. It's their best recipe for scores. It's going to shock Exeter. It's kind of bringing the game to them. Another recipe for them as well is just get Colby one-on-one. Get him one-on-one with anyone. Even 2-on-1 is good odds. Like he normally scores tries in that scenario, but one-on-one, if you can manage to manufacture
can Jack Noel contain him?
It's a good question. They're both very similar
Chapnell's
builds,
quite
and
physical.
he's also very combative. But they're both very prickly, combative customers, like kind of short man syndrome, very physical. It's a great matchup. They're two international, like world class caliber wingers, and they're both gritty. I do give Colby the edge in terms of just that X factor. But Noel, I probably give the edge as far as just meanness, which is something similar, parallels between this Exeter side and this Toulouse side. Maybe a bit more razzle-dazzle and X-Factor in Toulouse, but undoubtedly probably a more well-drilled side in Exeter. Like they know their function, know their roles inside out and backwards, know how to get things done. So for Toulouse, they need to play to their own strengths. They need to not get suckered into an arm wrestle at all. Hopefully they'll have gleaned learnings as much as we were saying Exeter have had the blueprint painted by Leinster's dominant performance over them last year. As much as they'll have learned from that, you'd hope that Toulouse have kind of learned from that as well. And
one
made
of the
some
things
adjustments.
that Toulouse haven't done is acquired a real poacher.
No, they don't.
And sort of moving on to what they need to do, because I think that the bulk of this game is going to be spent not with Toulouse having the ball, but with Exeter having the ball.
Yeah.
And how do they deal with that without knackering themselves
or
out
giving away
and
cheap
conceding
penalties.
inevitable tries and constantly just never being able to have the ball on their terms, having everything go against them and not being able to do anything against it. It's tough. Like, they know exactly what Exeter are going to bring, but you've got to bring some physicality yourself. Like, you've got to see guys like Jerome Kino, Francois
or Joe Decore getting big, like smashing and rips kind of thing. Before, if you can attack the pill in the contact for sure. If you can dislodge it, they are excellent off turnovers. That is if they can dislodge an extra pill and then whip it, flash it wide and score a try. That's obviously a winning picture for it, because they, as you say, they don't have any kind of experts in breakdown turnovers.
No,
but they are very, very good at capitalizing on turnover ball if they can force it, and they do have a good defensive pressure that yields some turnover tries in the top couture. Question mark is like, with a well organised, well drilled,
the likes of Francois Croix and the likes of Jerome Kino step up to the degree.
Rory Arnold,
Cyril Bay. If they can just attack the pill, stop Exeter at source, frustrate them and contain them, and then when they get the ball, strike. If they can limit Exeter to really having to work for their scores and then respond with scores themselves, that sort of is the Toulouse picture. But I actually think it's a really, really tough job for their defence in terms of how to contain them. And I think the angle that they should be shooting for is, as you point out, maybe trying to go for strips, constantly attacking the ball, frustrating the Exeter forward carriers, although they're very good at retaining
possession and retaining possession and holding the pill. It'll be interesting that, like, discipline will be put to the test if they are kind of a team like New Zealand as well. If the conventional wisdom is, if you hold it for 10 phases against them, they'll probably cough up a penalty because they just don't like defending. Just on a philosophical level, and Exeter will be looking to kind of capitalise on that for sure. So Toulouse need to be aware of it, and it's a big job for Aki and Gattoon to try and shut out the outside when they're in the middle third as well, because Exeter, as we said, will be trying to probe those channels. More so, it'll be a huge job for the people you said, the pack, who are probably outmatched, will need to step up to it.
Well, one of the things that I said that, like, Toulouse might like, obviously they like turnover ball and transitions of ball, so when Exeter have it in their own half, if they are adventurous, as we suggest they should be, and they do move it wide, that's when Gattoon and Aki really come into it. Can they shut Exeter out, and can they just force Exeter to do what they're comfortable to do, which is set up the box kick, put the bomb up, and then defuse the bomb and then go. That would be huge for Toulouse. And obviously discipline is so key, because if Exeter can set up camp in their half, all it takes is one penalty.
And they'll be there for 10 minutes
from anywhere, and they'll be there for 10 to 15 minutes and end up with 7 points, and you bollocksed, and perhaps the game past you. So that really is key for Toulouse. The margins are so tight, and if they make sloppy mistakes, they will be punished
for sure. So with all that said, who are you giving the edge to? It's a tough one to call.
It is a tough one to call. I mean, it sort of depends on my criteria for making the decision, in the sense of calling it. Like, we've gone through both teams and their conditions. Like, I think that Exeter have a far superior pack. I think that Exeter are so much more used to winning right now, that they look so comfortable within themselves. They have the formula down pat. Obviously Toulouse have the sharper attack, but is that going to be enough when, the old adage, forwards win games? If Exeter's pack is that much on top, as I think they should and perhaps will be, that it should be, especially with home advantage, a straightforward call for Exeter. But I'm giving pause. I'm giving pause.
Toulouse have 4 stars on their jersey.
That's what I was going to say. I'm giving pause because of the record that Exeter have had in Europe, even for the last number of years when they've been going so strong in the Premiership, they've always floundered in Europe. They're going to feel the pressure on themselves more than anything else because they have a real opportunity to win it this year. They'll feel they're in the semi-final, which they've never been to.
Yeah.
You know, they could set up a game against Saracens, which would be the ultimate grudge match of all grudge matches for a European final.
Yeah.
And then they have this team in Toulouse who have won it 4 times, who are European royalty, who play beautiful offensive football, and all it could take from a Toulouse point of view is an early score or two, and then all of a sudden Exeter's demons in Europe, you know, return and emerge, and all of a sudden drop balls come.
Maybe they're not as primed. They got whooped by Sarries. Their A team got whooped by Sarries going in. Northampton were not really good opposition in the quarter-final.
Well, I think if anyone is more primed, it should be the team that's been playing the more rugby,
which is
especially with the amount of squad rotation they've afforded themselves. Like Saracens, they come into the game really
more sharp,
with exactly as much game time as they want.
Yeah.
Where Toulouse have really had to hit the ground running. And the other thing I'd say is Toulouse did not look sharp in terms of their physicality and their tempo against Ulster. They were led away.
Even their execution, they coughed up a few tries. Like they ended up racking a very impressive score, considering the performance actually wasn't as good as all that. But Ulster again were quite as bad as Northampton were. Ulster weren't great opposition either in the quarter final.
Gun to my head, I can see both pictures. I can see them very clearly. Gun to my head, I think Exeter, and I think an all English final. For a few reasons, but I think they're more primed, more well conditioned. I think it just the timing of these semi-finals suits the English teams a little better than it does suit the French teams, and I think they have a pack that should beat that Toulouse pack up from minute 1 to minute 80.
Fair enough.
And I think that might be what happens.
Yeah, I think you might be right, but however, I'm going to vote with my heart and say, come on, Toulouse. I think Toulouse are going to get it done.
The scores.
I think it's going to be an England v France final, and I don't see Sarries losing, so I'm going to say Toulouse are the ones to win it.
Listen, fair enough. Yes, so that wraps up the challenge, the Champions Cup, I should say, previews of the 2 semi-finals. We're going to move on now and just take a quick look at the sort of B tournament in Europe, the Challenge Cup. The 2 semi-finals in that competition are going ahead as well.
We kind of have the good, the bad and the ugly in amongst those 3 games. The first of the semi-finals is Bristol v Bordeaux, which is at 7:45 on Friday, so it's kind of curtain raiser for the weekend, and it's at Ashton Gate, ref by Frank Murphy. And these are 2 exciting up and coming sides. I think I have a lot of time for both of these sides and the way they play.
There's no question that if you're going to watch one Challenge Cup game this weekend, it should be this one.
Yeah,
super attack. I mean, Bristol have a lot of flash, a lot of flair.
Radradra,
mostly
recently.
They have Semi-Radradra. That's basically what that side is.
They have Callum Sheedy as well.
Yeah, but mostly
they have
Semi-Radradra.
Pat Lam coaching, which in the same mould as his Connacht side. They're a team that love using the ball, love playing the game with tempo. But Bordeaux, similarly, on the other side, are also a team that love moving the ball, have some serious assets on the wing. They have Cordero and Ben Lam, serious acquisition from the Hurricanes there. So the 2 danger men on the wing.
One of the things I really like about this Bordeaux team is that they've gone with, first of all, 10-12 combinations as distributors is something I, as a battered, abused Irish fan, I'm desperate to see more of.
Yes,
and I love that they've gone with that, and I also love that they've got the young Samoan lad Siu Teni, who we were watching last year.
Brilliant 10 in the World Cup. Yeah, hoping he could have got his chance. He was brilliant in the run up to the World Cup. Actually,
he was brilliant in last year's PNC. He's a young Samoan. He was 19 last year. It's 20 obviously this year. But oodles of talent, and him playing in the 12 shirt with Jalibert at 10 is just a nice wee combo. So I think Bordeaux are a very fun team to watch. Bristol, I think a lot of people will be more familiar with. They go viral every week because Semi-Radradra's done something else.
Hughes doing some carrying, but it is normally Semi-Radradra the source of all their play.
Team, so
it's brilliant. Like if you're playing it in a team with Semi-Radradra, he should take over.
Yeah,
and with home advantage in Ashton Gate, it's unusual for Bristol to be this far into a European comp. Their progress under Ben Lam, or under Pat Lam even, has been pretty much just on the upward trajectory. He came in, brought them up from the championship, secured their place by consolidating in the second year, and now this season they're sitting second currently in the Premiership, and here they are in the semi-final.
They're in a scrap in the Premiership for playoff places. One team will miss out of them, Sale and
Northampton Wasps? Or the
no. One, say Bath as well.
Bath and Wasps.
And Sale and Bristol and somebody else that I'm forgetting.
I think Wasps are there.
Are Wasps there?
Yeah.
Oh, well. But yeah, they're in a scrap for playoff places. They should edge it, but they're in a scrap for playoff places, and they're obviously in this competition in the business end. And I think Patlan will be keen to win a major trophy, so I think they're going to be throwing
the big dogs out in this one.
The big dogs out in this one for sure is right. But where Bordeaux, on the other hand, I think are a coming team. But they were top of the top tours when it ended last season, and they are a dark horse. If they take Europe in any way seriously, which I really hope they do, they are a dark horse to go on and do interesting things, both in this competition maybe, and also perhaps in the main event.
Yeah, there are two sides that you could be seeing in the main event next year, because if Bristol will probably qualify for Champions Cup honours for the first time under Pat Lam next year, if they do manage to hold on to those playoff spots.
Oh, that doesn't matter. There's 8 Premiership teams in this.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, they're already qualified, so we will be getting used to seeing a lot of these teams. So yeah, as you say, if you're to watch one semi-final from this tournament, let it be this one. 2 teams worth your eyeballs. In the other semi-final, however, on Saturday evening, we have the bad and the ugly, really, between
there might be golf or something on Saturday
evening. Maybe something else is on. Toulon v Leicester. Leicester rather uniquely got a bye because Cast, I believe it was, that had too many COVID cases, so they had to have a walkover. Leicester have before the lockdown, they were an absolute basket case mess of a club, sitting bottom of the Premiership apart from Sarries, who were already relegated. And since they came back, they have been really poor again. Nothing much has changed. They have a few new personnel in there. They made Ellis Genge their captain. They lost Manu Tuilagi. They brought in a few. Nodolo's arrived in his stead. They're quite an ugly team from the top down. Jordan Murphy kind of has, as director of rugby, has not really done a stellar job.
If you look at a 5-year track, these are probably the 2 teams who've got it most wrong in Europe.
Possibly so.
Toulon and Leicester in terms of falls from grace, and both sides play very bludgeoning, ugly games with just curiosities. I mean, there's an ancient Sergio Parise at 8 in terms of people of interest in Toulon. They have Baptiste Serran playing out of position in 10 because
that's a bizarre one as well.
Of course they do.
Well, that's on brand. Sure, they wouldn't be forcing Sevilla to play a centre as well. They got him in out of form and decided to give him the 13 jersey
whenever it went wrong. And Leicester also have the 2 English halfbacks, Ben Youngs and George Ford, as well as Nemani Ndolo. So they should be great. But both sides play very ugly, slow rugby, and it's going to be a slogfest.
Yeah. Also, the defensive chops of the Leicester players, I don't know what they're doing. They're doing a reverse drift with very little line speed or bite, and it's just not very Tigers-esque. That being said, they'll take it. First European semi-final in I don't know how many years for the Welford Road faithful, so it is still a stellar club with a lot of storied history. They'll hope to get a big scalp in Toulon. I don't necessarily see it. I think they might be outmatched by the home side in Toulon.
I think both sides are capable of losing to each other, but certainly if you're going to pick one match to watch, the 2 positive up-and-coming teams in Bristol and Bordeaux might be the one to watch. I don't have much charitable to say about these 2 teams. They're both getting a lot wrong, and it's going to be an ugly game. Mark my words.
You mark my words. It'll be an ugly game. But with that, I suppose we will park the European rugby for now. That is semi-final weekend is what's coming up. But there is other rugby news. This weekend is not just about Europe, although that probably is the big story. We have the Superfan Saturday in South Africa. South African Rugby Returns. Aren't you excited? Yeah. It's only been 6 months, an unprecedented 6 months of no footy for the World Cup champions. And since they've played last, we've had the Southern Kings go bust. The Cheetahs haven't played any of the games. So literally, apart from the overseas players, none of them have played any rugby in that long. So it'll be definitely probably be a pre-season-y feel to some of the games, but it is just great to see them back.
Yeah, it's definitely good to see that for sure. Sort of one of the pre-pandemic emphasis that Rassie Erasmus was putting on South African rugby is in his new role as director of rugby, having won the World Cup as head coach, is improving those club sides, is getting them up to a much higher standard than they had been playing at.
De-loosening them.
Yeah, for the most part, with some exceptions, it was going pretty well. The Sharks looked like a very serious outfit pre-lockdown.
Kind of the standard bearers at the moment, pre-lockdown with there in their defensive line. They're a very physical team. They got that win in New Zealand in the season.
They did. They beat the Highlanders comfortably. They had a few wins.
Yeah.
They were going great guns. The Sharks. They were looking like potential Super Rugby finalists.
Potentially, yeah. We never got to find that out because COVID intervened.
No, yeah, they've obviously got a great like they have this lethal back three with Fassi and Nkosi and Mapimpi, and then a brilliant defensive team inside of that, Esterhazen and Lucanio Am as well.
Yeah.
With an exciting Kerwin Bosch at 10 and some serious forwards in the pack as well. So they have a very sharp team. They would be favourites going into it. But obviously with the layoff and everything, you're going to expect a bit of rust. But it's just good to see South African sides back. I mean, the two games this weekend, they're both in Loftus and Pretoria, Loftus Versfeld.
Yeah.
Back to back on Saturday afternoon.
So 3:30.
Hugely frustrating that they clashed them with the European semi-finals, but I guess nothing could have been done to prevent it.
Apart from maybe putting them at another time.
Yeah, well, that if you're talking crazy.
Yeah. Super Sunday maybe.
Yeah, well, sure look, Saturday is premium time, but I mean, it feels like they could have done a better job. I mean, nobody's clashing with Toulon Leicester. That gets a time slot all of its own.
Yes.
But anyway, sure look, it starts with the Bulls against the Sharks. Bulls be the home side, Pretoria based, but the Sharks obviously be favourites to win that. And then the Lions versus Stormers after that. It's just very, very, very good to see these teams back. It'd be nice to see sort of the Bulls and, to be honest, the other three teams apart from the Sharks, it'd be nice to see them find a little something. The Lions in particular have fallen from grace dramatically and looked a little lost.
Yeah.
They have sort of the reputation and the identity within South African rugby of playing the sort of faster, more tempo-filled backs attacking rugby.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see them just throw that shape at the Stormers and challenge them a little bit in that regard. Just try to notch up as many tries as possible.
Because if it's a slow, physical, let's get started in the season game, you'd probably give the edge to the Stormers in that one and the Sharks in the other one. Whereas the Bulls can strike, and if the Sharks are a little loose, you'll be hoping the Bulls with some advantage there could maybe string some phases together. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean they have not tightened up yet, and I think that's something that for the Bulls, who are such a great traditional side in South African rugby, you know, they like you would expect them to sort of be much more physical. There's a Victor Matfield's team back in the day, Brian Abana's team back in the day. This is one of the great Super Rugby franchises. It would be fantastic to see them looking tighter and more and better coached and give the Sharks something of a game. Likewise, the Stormers, if they can just tighten up, be nice and physical, but also nice and roaming. They're sort of a nice amalgamation of sort of somewhere between the Lions and the Sharks.
Yes,
is where the Stormers lie. But just in general, in terms of personnel, we don't even know what we're going to be looking at yet. We haven't got the teams or anything. Yeah. So it's just a game. They're just a couple of games to watch. South African rugby is a lot of fun at the best of times. There's nice physicality. There's nice defending. There's also some super tries. And hopefully we're going to be able to, like we did in Super Rugby Aotearoa, see some new South African talent, some new guys coming through, some new guys putting their hands up and saying, hey, I want to be picked for the Springboks.
Exactly,
and sort of that whole season after 6-month layoff starts here for South Africa.
Yeah, well, South Africa announced last week that they were doing a 4-month domestic season, obviously with the lockdown and pandemic scenario. So this is the first weekend, the curtain raiser for that, and they are the world champions, so it'll be nice to see some of the rugby from them. We've just kind of missed them in terms of getting the calendar back up and running and getting the games back going. So they're late to the party, but better late than never. It'll be good to watch.
Congratulations to them getting rugby back, and fantastic to see them back, and we'll certainly be keeping a keen eye on that and on the South African rugby as it progresses throughout the season.
For sure. And then I suppose one more thing, we will just move on to our news of the week. There was a few things announced in the rugby. I don't know if you want to take with relish the first one.
Oh god, yeah. Well, we're just going to open covering as briefly as possible the fact that the French Rugby Federation president, Monsieur Bernard Laporte, is being held for questioning over his ties with Montpellier owner Mohamed Al-Trad amid an investigation into influence peddling and illegal acquiring of assets, a judicial source said on Tuesday. Yes, indeed. And there's 4 other people also been detained for questioning, including the 2023 World Cup chief organiser Claude Atcher and FFR officials Serge Simon and Nicolas Horquet. So yeah, lots of French higher ups and officials involved in the 2023 World Cup and others. are being detained for questioning at the moment in France. And no, I have nothing to say on that because it's an ongoing investigation, apart from the fact that it's not exactly off-brand.
No, if you want to hear more about our opinions on it, we did have in our last podcast a little thing on Bill Beaumont P-show stuff that we got into a bit of Laporte and our thoughts on the guy.
I really would like to not mention him next podcast we do.
Yes, hopefully now he won't come up the next time, but there he is there.
Hey, maybe he's going to jail. He laughed.
No, that's not going to happen. But more broadly and probably more worrying overall, just the finances of the game, rugby finances in general, are in danger. There's been a lot of reports from all over, like just it's kind of dropping through. It's all a direct result of these times. There's no gate being pulled in anywhere, no meaningful gate anyway, even if you're allowing minimal capacity as some are. So you had attendance is down. You had Qantas ended its 30-year relationship with Rugby Australia, which is just another kind of thing from Australian rugby being
nail
removed.
in the coffin, but
nail in the
coffin. A bit too dark.
It is a bit too dark. The championship in England also in doubt. They had their funding absolutely slashed to 40 grand for next year, where it was 640 grand, which is just so seismic, it's crazy. That is just effectively rendering it semi-pro.
But the IRFU and the RFU have been asking sort of for bailouts from their respective government. They're all losing colossal amounts of money, and with no fan attendance, as was just announced in the UK, and has obviously been the case in Ireland as well. And that looking to be the case for the foreseeable,
including the ends of the Six Nations campaign, which is normally a big money winner for them.
There are unions who are shot for money. Another one is Georgia Rugby Union, who we're obviously big fans of and followers of. They still haven't hired a head coach since
the World
Milton
Cup.
Hague departed after the World Cup.
Yeah,
so they're supposed to be playing an Autumn Nations Cup in a couple of months' time. In less than a couple of months' time, I should say.
Yeah.
And that's
couple that with the fact that the Welsh Union is always broke and always
Welsh Union has cancelled their sevens team.
Yeah.
So it just would be remiss of us to come back and talk rugby without noting these issues and these concerns.
Yeah.
I think where possible, like, this is obviously going to be damaging. The pandemic has been sort of damaging in the way it's ravaged through just about everything. But it's not cause for dramatic concern in the sense that the foundations of rugby are still there.
Yeah.
And I'm just a little conscious of the fact, I would look at the Guardian, and every article that the Guardian has had on rugby in the last month has been like sort of these exaggerated headlines of like why rugby is at death's door.
Yeah.
This will be the final nail in the coffin of rugby. Why professional rugby is about to disappear.
Yeah.
And it's like they're like there's genuine concerns, and there is serious damage being done. And I think where possible, government assistance and fan assistance is needed. And obviously the news that there's going to be no fans in England has been met with criticism from the likes of even Jack Noel was actually given out about it.
Yeah.
But obviously there needs to be a balance with dealing with the pandemic, and we're not qualified to talk about that. But long term, even if rugby takes a minor hit, I think that the grassroots and the support is there. Rugby's not about to disappear in that sense, and the fans, the people who love the game, and the people who watch the game, and the people who play the game, like ourselves, like no doubt yourselves watching, if you have stumbled on us, I'd expect you to be well ingrained in the rugby universe. But it's us who keep it going, and so I certainly think where possible and whenever it is possible, you need to make the effort to get out and support the game.
For sure.
If there is fan attendance allowed wherever you are, if there is limited capacity, you should try and get out. You should try and spend money on your team. And in your union generally,
show support for the team,
and
for
I think
the game.
Long term the game, it's a hiccup for just about everything, but I think the game will recover because of the strength of rugby people and rugby fans around the world.
Exactly. When the commerce returns, the commerce will return to rugby as well, and I think ultimately it will, but there is no doubt damage being done, and it is just being like little symptoms of that damage are popping up all over the place in the examples we cited. So it is a concern and something that has to be given ongoing attention. But anyway, just in other news then, we have Rob Howley has been recruited by Canada, the Canadian Rugby Union, to be a senior assistant coach to Kingsley Jones, another Welsh expat over there who's been there.
Mysteriously still in a job, Kingsley Jones.
Considering how abject they were at the World Cup. It's probably not a terrible recruitment. He's also going to be working as a consultant for the Toronto Arrows in Major League Rugby in 2021. So yeah, that seems a shrewd enough kind of acquisition. The Welsh brain drain, as they say, and some good coaching heads over there.
Rob Howley is someone who I definitely like. He was part of that great Gatland coaching squad. Obviously, things haven't gone well for Gats in New Zealand since he left Wales.
Yeah.
It's still a question mark in my mind how much influence he made or had in that Welsh camp. But he is an experienced coach, and going to a tier 2 nation, I do love to see that. I wish we'd see more of it.
We need,
and taking taking a consultancy role in their major league team is great as well. Major League Rugby is a serious potentially awesome game-changing weapon in terms of rugby and how we go forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Major Rugby, there's news in that department as well. It's been announced now what's going on next year. Starting in March, two new teams in Major League Rugby, one based in Dallas, one based in Los Angeles.
Excellent.
So it's going to be a 13-team competition, going to take place in March next year. They'll have, I believe, 12 rounds of regular season games and then a playoff situation.
They'll all be broadcast on Facebook Live, which is excellent. So you can, speaking of showing support for the game, you can watch some American footy with some random kind of blast from the past will pop up there. I think Bastro's out playing there now.
Yeah,
certainly from our point of view, Cathal Marsh, former Leinster head, out over there. There's a few other players playing their trade over there.
Are more and more pros well-known pros are dotting that around into Major League Rugby. The only thing is that the Hawaiian franchise that was backed by those New Zealand legends, not this year anyway, so there's no sign yet of the Hawaiian Island team coming into Major League Rugby, which is unfortunate. But great news about the broadcasting on Facebook Live. I believe it's on CBS in America.
Yes.
They have the rights, I think, but outside of America, everyone can watch on Facebook Live, which is fantastic, and I think it's a lesson that every league needs to learn. If there are no broadcast rights being held in X country for your competition, for the love of God, put it out on Facebook Live. Let people watch.
Yes.
Eyeballs are needed on this game. It's still a growing sport.
For sure.
And competitions like the Top Tours and even the Pro 14 can learn a thing or two in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
The Top Tours is maddening. I mean, Top Tours has a league with players from all over the world. Georgian players and
spend loads
more and more South American players coming in and Fijian players and everywhere, and no one outside France can watch a game right now. It's crazy. Broadcast it on Facebook. Like, there are eyeballs who want to watch your league. Give them the opportunity. The game needs it.
Yes.
So great leadership there from Major League Rugby, and I'm looking forward to it. I enjoyed very much the last instalment. And so I look forward to it coming back. So that's definitely a bit of good news.
For sure.
In the sort of, we have the good, the bad, and the weird news. This is a bit of, I would say, weird news that's also kind of good.
Yeah.
Next month, the Bermuda World Tens series is set to be launched, and it's sort of intended as a launch pad for a sort of T20 cricket style rugby series. They say. To start in 2021. Tens being sort of somewhere between 7s and 15s.
Well, that's as they say on says on the pill. It's 10 teams of 10, and they're actually 10-minute halves.
10-minute halves.
Yeah. So it's tens everywhere. And a few notable players have already signed up.
There's 8 teams, and they say next year they're going to have 16 teams. They're so random. Like Ohio Aviators, the Asia Pacific Dragons, the SX10 team based in Cape Town, the London Royals, and the Miami Sun, with the last 3 of them created entirely for this.
Right.
But as you say, there's some pretty interesting on-field talent arriving in.
I see Collins Njira, classy act from Kenya that he is. Colin Sao, 7-star. Cecil Africa, who's awesome. Tom Mitchell as well.
Yeah.
William Baka. A lot of those are like class 7s operators. And then even from the 15s game, you have...
there's a few guys from the Premiership coming in from the 15s game as well.
Tui Tavake, interesting from the applying their trade in the Gallagher Premiership. Yeah, it should be an interesting spectacle. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. I wouldn't kind of justify the old cricket T20 kind of nonsense with anything.
I think that aspect of it is doomed to fail. I don't think the 10s is going to grab the attention of people in the way that they think.
Least of all the fact that the 15s is the established game and 7s is the Olympic game.
Yeah, there's very little room for it, and it's not going to be like. there's this sort of quick fix theory that a lot of sort of crazy rich guys tend to have with sports, where they think they can model something from one sport and move it to another sport without really understanding anything about the sport they're looking at.
Yeah, well, it's the venture capitalist model.
15s is perfectly popular and less easy to follow or understand than 10s would be. It's an 80-minute game. Cricket needed changing because their established form of game was 5 days long,
and more often than not ended up with a draw despite two teams scoring different scores.
Indeed, that is a very very different situation. So in that regard, I think it's probably not going to work, but I do think it's great that this is going on. I think it's great to see rugby in Bermuda of all places. It's great to see in COVID time someone sponsoring, getting players in, having a rugby combine to get some players.
As far as COVID's concerned, there's going to be stringent protocols, which is excellent. They'll all have their own little camps and they'll be isolated and tested. So
just seeing these guys employed and given something to do in the absence of the Sevens series or in the absence of a contract. That's just great.
As you said, the last Sevens news we heard was that Wales were cutting their Sevens team. So obviously this is a much better bit of news than that. It is a bit of a novelty, but I will watch it. It'll definitely be a fun spectacle. So for the rugby nerds among you, keep an eye out for that. That's going to be on next month. And then just the last little thing, just bringing it back to home, we have the Pro 14 announced the first 8 rounds of fixtures for the new season, starting I think in the 2nd of October, so a very quick turnaround for those Pro 14 teams. But the interesting note is that Monday fixtures are going to be involved for the first time ever in the league, mainly due to kind of the condensed nature of the calendar, the international window overlapping.
Yeah, and also just there's no fans. There's no fans for now, so it's just about getting TV eyeballs on it, and a lot of the season is going to have to take place during the international season, because they're going to have to rack up as much game time as they want. It's going to be a Pro 12 this year, despite it's retaining its name, the Pro 14, despite the fact that there are now only 13 alive teams in it and only 12 will be playing.
So it's the Pro 12.
It's the Pro 12 for next year, really. The Cheetahs are sitting out the season for travel, COVID restrictions.
And they're also going to be involved in the domestic South African season that they were talking about early.
So it's going to be an ordinary sort of Celtic and Italian league, as it was, with 12 teams and a regular season, no conferences. That is the situation with the Pro 14. They also announced at the same time that they're currently in talks with South African Rugby about the possibility of incorporating more South African teams. Apparently for the time being, South Africa are committed through next season to putting 2 teams into the league, and they seemingly are willing to, if nothing progresses from here, put another existing franchise in with the Cheetahs, which is exciting in itself.
That is good, yeah.
And there's the potential for South Africa to put more teams, or perhaps the ultimate switch, which is something talks are ongoing at the moment. But it's something we're very curious to see, and like in terms of where South Africa are with it, I don't know, but it's definitely an interesting one.
It is definitely an interesting one. Sure, actually, we did. If you're interested in our take on it, we did do a collaboration with our friend Don, Unbiased Rugby, which you'll find over on his channel, or actually we have it linked in the description below, or on our YouTube page as well. You can find that video as well. We went into a bit more depth on exactly that concept. But just as far as the news that broke today, it was just the fixtures were announced for first 8 weeks. We know it's going to be a Pro 12, despite being called a Pro 14, still branded a Pro 14. And the talks are ongoing. The ball's still in South Africa's court, I feel, with that one. Totally. We don't know what the future lies. It would definitely improve the league no end to have the South African teams in it, but it remains to be seen for the season that
there
comes.
Are so many factors they have to consider, like, do they move their test team up north? How if they choose not to move their test team into the northern calendar, but their domestic teams into the northern calendar, how on earth could that possibly work? And all of that stuff. We went into all the depth in that video with Don, so if you do want to check that out, I definitely would recommend that you do so,
for sure.
But yeah, we're going to leave it there. That we're all out of stuff. We've gone and we've gone and we've gone, and now we've ran out of things to talk about for rugby for this week.
Indeed, but it is good to be back. We will try and be back next week with a final preview, or even just a review of the action at the weekend, because there'll be a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to try and get back up and running with it. But if you did enjoy the podcast and do so, please like, comment and share and subscribe down below. It really does help the channel out.
If you do subscribe, click the bell to get notified when we do upload our videos. which I'm sure works.
Yes.
After, you know, however many months it's been, I'm sure there'll be no hiccups there. All our subscribers will be instantly notified.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah, follow us on Twitter either at Overlap Rugby. I have been Daragh. That is Shane, and we're going to be back with you over the coming weeks as the season gets more and more dramatic and international rugby returns post COVID. So listen, good luck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Care. Bye. Right, you're up here.
Yes.
Any rust? Oh, a ping. Hey.
Nah, it's a bit of it. Rubbish. Out of form. Thoroughly out of form, I say.